So I'm so thankful that we have Hugh Brown joining us today. Hugh is a multiple best-selling author and Australian documentary photographer, and his current major project documents the world's artisanal miners, working in some of the most extreme and difficult working conditions. So in this talk, Hugh will take us on a journey to some of the more difficult places on the planet, and through his photographs, hopes to drive awareness of this huge section of the world's population so that better decisions can be made about their futures. So thank you so much for your time, Hugh. It's really looking forward to learning about this. Just going to share this for you.
All right. Well, thank you, Jess, for having me on, and thank you, everyone, for coming along to listen. I'm sort of in Marble Bar at the moment. Just saying to Jess a minute ago, I mean, rolling around in the dirt, nearly lost a rear left tyre before. So this is nice to sort of sit down and talk about something that I'm very, very passionate about. Next slide, thanks, Jess. And then the next slide again. So today is not about sort of, a lot of people interested in sort of some of the technical aspects about what I do, read camera and shutter speeds and f-stop. I'm not really interested in that stuff so much. I'm hopeful, though, that today, for those that already know something about artisanal mining, that I can, add to your repertoire of knowledge, and for those that don't know anything about it at all, hopefully you'll go away knowing something about a group of people that most people in the world have never heard of. The camera can be a powerful medium for change, and last year, quite unexpectedly, I was named out of Canada as one of the top 100 influencers in the corporate social responsibility field for the work that I've been doing on this project. So hopefully over the coming years, I can build on that work and educate people about some of the aspects of artisanal mining and why it's important to us back in the developed world. Next, please, Jess. So back in 2006, a client asked me to go to Africa to do some work for them, a mining client. I nearly didn't go, but I went, and while I was over there, I was fascinated by a group of people that I saw mining beside the roadside near a place called Furi in Ghana. And I was fascinated because it was a visual picture that I'd never seen. And what it reminded me of was pictures that I'd seen of the Victorian West Australian goldfields circa the 1850s. As you can see, these guys here, everything being largely done by hand. Next slide, please, Jess. And I saw hundreds of them beside the road. My driver was a bit horrified when I asked him to stop, and so that I could get out and go and perhaps take some photos, because he said these places can be quite dangerous. Next, please. And so in late 2010, I decided to do a book on artisanal mining around the world. I had no idea how I was going to fund it. I had no idea how I was going to market it, who might be interested in it. All I knew was that it would be expensive and hard, and it's been all of those things, and there's been other things, sort of personal safety thrown in as well to a large extent as well. It's come out of that project, but I'm about 75% into the project. You can see the draft cover there on the on screen there now. Next, please. So artisanal miners, my definition of artisanal mining is basically people using predominantly their hands, and there's within that that definition, there's varying degrees of mechanisation. So in Africa, for example, you'll see artisanal miners using largely picks and shovels. Places such as South America, it's a bit more mechanised. So the resource that these guys are tapping can be, usually there's a grade cutoff, so anything that's too low grade and it's not worth them getting in and having a crack at. But artisanal miners will mine small ore bodies that are high grade, and then they'll mine other larger ore bodies that are also high grade. It's the second category of ore body that becomes challenging for large scale miners and artisanal mining interaction, because very often when there's a large ore body there, or thought to be a large ore body there, and that's usually indicated by the numbers of people mining there, the government will then call for tenders for international mining companies to come along and to take over that lease. And usually what will happen is international mining company will come in, and if it's a small company, a lot of the people on the ground there will be quite fascinated for a while by these artisanal miners, like I was. But then as time goes on, that coexistence that seemed to be working okay initially, will start to sort of break down, because the international large-scale guys will get sick of them on the tenements, and then very often, if it's in West Africa, for example, the gendarmes will be called in, the miners will be booted off. There might be 1 or 2 or 3 people killed in the process, and then the artisanal miners will go somewhere else. The low-grade ore bodies are generally not viable, as I said a minute ago, just basically because of the manual requirement. Next, please, Jess. But this is just a list of the ones that I know of, and there's others that I probably couldn't call to mind, but there's so many different minerals extracted by artisanal mining. So the one that everyone knows about is gold. The one that no one knows about is mammoth tusk, for example. But in between, you've got silver, tantalum, tungsten, copper, cobalt, coal, oil, gems, mica, sand, clays, stone, salt, sulfur, coral, mercury, rare earths, amber, and whatever else. So one of the challenges with, and one of the reasons I think artisanal mining is under the gun at the moment, is that the number of, larger, easily accessible gold ore bodies worldwide is on the decline, and very often these artisanal miners, they'll be into the good gold. And so for some mining companies at least, the environmental practices, the safety, and all that sort of stuff that gives ASM, artisanal mining, its negative connotations, is also an excuse for some companies to get access to the ore bodies. And I know some people will disagree with that, but that's been my experience. Around 80% of the world's sapphire supply is artisanally provided by artisanal miners. 26% of tantalum, 25% of tin, and then about 20% of rare earths. Rare earths is a difficult one to be hugely accurate on, because a lot of that comes out of China, and the capacity to get accurate information out of China re-artisanal mining is very, very difficult. Next, please, Jess. Artisanal mine, and just while I'm on that last slide, if we can just go back for a minute. One of the interesting things about artisanal mining is that it serves as a balancing agent for supply and demand spikes in certain commodities. And one of those commodities is cobalt, where, particularly that can be subject to sharp fluctuations. So what comes out of that is, because large-scale miners can't up or reduce their output so easily, artisanal miners step in quite often to fill the breach on that one. So that's sort of a little known fact that a lot of people don't know. Next, please, Jess. So artisanal mining seems to cut off once companies reach a certain GDP per capita. And the reason for that is the additional wealth that goes with that higher GDP per capita enables people to buy machines and all of that sort of stuff. And so as soon as the machines cut in, the artisanal miners very often are displaced, often wholly displaced rather than only partially displaced. And an example of that I had was in Cameroon a few years ago. And, there've been 1,500 sand divers working on the Wuri River estuary near Douala on the Cameroonian coast. And then about 12 to 18 months after I left, a dredge moved in and literally displaced 1,500 workers on the river. Now you can say, oh, well, the money from the dredge is flowing back to the local population. But in that case, the dredge was owned by sort of people from outside Cameroon. Artisanal mining interestingly also happens in some of the richest countries in the world. So that includes Australia, Canada, Russia. Russia was one that not many people know that it happens in. The United States, we just don't refer to them as artisanal miners. They might be referred to as wildcat miners or whatever else. And in those countries, there's always going to be a portion of people that are chasing their own dreams or like that life of independence that comes with being a miner. And as I say that, literally about a kilometre as the crow flies from where I'm sitting is a friend of mine. He owns the fourth oldest mining lease here in Western Australia, and he's 78, and he's still working the air league underground in that mine. In Russia, independent prospecting for gold was outlawed by Stalin back in 1954, but it still happens in remote pockets. It's just that most locals don't even know that it goes on. Next, please, Jess. So here's a couple of examples of artisanal mining. This is an artisanal sulfur mine in an active volcano in Indonesia. I did 2 trips into that volcano. I think the grade of the sulfur they're pulling out of there is something like 97%. That's owned by a Chinese company. That mine, when I was there back in 2012, was on the second highest level of alert. It was actually a higher level of alert than White Island in New Zealand when that erupted a couple of year or two back. Next, please, Jess. Another example of sulfur miners, the concentrations of sulfur dioxide and hydrogen sulfide in that mine was something like 200 times the safe allowable limit in the UK and Australia. And as some listening will know, when the sulfur mixes with the moisture in your eyes or your throat or your lungs, it creates sulfuric acid, so it burns. So it's not particularly comfortable. Next questions. This was in northern Pakistan. These guys were mining gems. These were some of the highest altitude miners in the world. They were working at about just over 15,000 feet. There are some examples of higher artisanal mining, I think, in the Andes, but I haven't seen them. But I'm told that those guys in the Andes were mining at around about 5,000 meters. And one of the things that acts as a cutoff in terms of these guys as to how high they can mine is availability of water, because obviously at certain altitudes, water never melts, and so it's very hard for them to sort of, have their basic sustenance and where necessary to operate machines. Another sort of interesting thing about artisanal mining that gets a lot of publicity, I suppose, is often they're referred to as illegals, and that is such a grey area in terms of true what's true, what's legal, what's true illegality, and what's quasi illegality. And I'll give you a couple of examples. These guys here in northern Pakistan, they didn't regard the government of Pakistan as having any legitimate ownership or rights to the minerals that they were extracting. And the reason they said that was because this part of northern Pakistan because it's part of the sort of disputed Kashmir area, this part of northern Pakistan wasn't actually officially in the Pakistani constitution, and as a result, they were getting very, very little as a community from the Pakistan government. So another example that I think of as well, it was when I've been in places like Burkina Faso in West Africa. What typically happens over there is it might be where these guys are mining. I've seen 50,000 of them in one spot before. Where they're mining, the government might regard as illegal, but they don't. There's no enforcement. There's no prosecution. They even have police stationed there just to make sure there's no trouble and all that sort of stuff. So even though it might be on the statute books regarded as an illegal mining area, the fact is the government doesn't do anything about it. It's quite happy for them to stay there because it employs so many people. It's doing the government a favour as well. Next, please, Jez. This was in Bolivia. One of the most sort of confronting places I've worked, I suppose. The estimates say that since mining began there, and these guys are mining silver and tin, since mining began there in 1545, there's been between 4 and 8 million people die on that one mountain. When I was there, estimates were saying there's between 3 and 5 people a month were dying there, and they're often getting taken away in the middle of the night and buried in the villages, so there was no hoo-ha around it. These guys were. It was one of the most dangerous places that I've ever worked. These guys are pushing these wagons. Two guys were pushing 2.5 ton wagons at about just below 15,000 feet. It was incredible. Next, please, Jess. This guy again in Bolivia, he was what's called a percussion driller. So in a large-scale underground mine, we'll see jumbos doing that work, 2-boom jumbos. He was a 1-boom jumbo with a hammer and a chisel, and in an 8-hour shift, he would drill between 2 and 4 30-centimetre holes. And then they chuck their explosives in, and then boombo, and then they go back in and keep drilling. Typically, the percussion drillers were used where it was too inaccessible inside the mountain to get machinery such as air leaks. To give you an idea, just to get down to that place, you were going down very dangerous ladders. You were crawling, through 18-inch gaps, often on a 45, 50-degree angle, carrying, pulling gear in there, and just hoping the mountain didn't cave in on you. And one of the challenges with Cerro Rico, and that was the name of the mountain, was it was like a piece of Swiss cheese, and they hadn't, all the mining voids hadn't been properly documented. So the mountain started out at about 4,832 metres in 1545 before mining commenced. And when I was there, it was down to around about 4,790. So if you can think of a piece of Swiss cheese and the mountain's collapsing in on itself, that's what Cerro Rico was doing. So as someone wrote, at some point, there's going to be a lot of people killed in one hit, because you could lose 1,500 people in one hit if the mountain sort of keeps behaving like that. Next, please, Jess. This is in West Africa. You can see a place like this. I think this was Yako in central Burkina Faso, and there's probably about 10,000 people working in that one spot when I was there. You can see the shaft, you can see sort of front left. That might have been 20, 30 metres straight down. Typically, the guys go down those shafts, they crab walk down. So they've carved out little footholes either side, and then you crab walk down and just make sure you don't fall, because if you fall, you get a problem. Next, please, Jess. This was in Burma. A lot of people don't realise that oil is mined artisanally in places around the world, Burma being probably the major one. But I think it also takes place in Indonesia. The people I latched onto when I was over there were what I called oil scavengers, and they were basically going around with buckets and rags, and they were scooping up spilt oil in the oil field and then squeezing it into buckets, taking it back to their camp, filtering it out and selling it to the fuel tankers going out. So and these people weren't to be pitied. They loved their work, and they took great pride in what they did as well. Next, please, Jess. This is a kid in the up near a place called Waiugia in northwestern Burkina Faso. Unfortunately, you can't go there anymore because, you wouldn't go there anymore because just extremism's taken hold. And it's not safe. It probably wasn't super safe then when I was there, but since I was there, the security situation in the country's deteriorated massively to the extent, the hotel I used to stay at in Wagga's been blown up. The coffee shop across the road got attacked. And then even, I think 3 years ago or so, I needed to do a handover of some stuff to, on behalf of some friends back here in Australia. And I asked my fixer to arrange a rendezvous point. And he picked a place called the Istanbul Cafe in central Wagga. And I got there and I said, look, we're not doing it here. I said, turn the car around, go 150 metres down the road. I'll do a quick sweep and then I'll come back out just to make sure they're not in there. And they all laughed at me at the time. And about 2 to 3 months after that, that got shot up as well by Al-Qaeda. So you just need to be careful in these places. You've got to have your wits about you. You've got to be on your game the whole time. And you've got to sort of stay low profile as best as possible. And I still need to get better at staying low profile. Next, please, Jess. And just actually, before you go on, this slide also captures an aspect of artisanal mining that gets huge attention from various quarters. And I think a lot of it's misguided. And that relates to kids working in mining. The human rights groups, the NGOs, they all jump up and down about it. But the reality is that if this kid doesn't work, quite probably this kid doesn't eat. So from a very young age, kids are required in these countries to help provide for the family. And it's just the way it is. You can say it's good or it's bad, but unless we're prepared to give something up in the West and help these people, and that's not just give platitudes to these people, then it's not incumbent on us, I believe, to be turning around saying they should or shouldn't be doing this. Next, please, Jess. So some of the artisanal mining locations around the world that I've sort of worked in, and some that I haven't. On the left in South America, you can see Bolivia, which is where I worked. Up in the northwest, you'll see Colombia. Australia, obviously, you've got some artisanal mining, places like Coober Pedy, Lightning Ridge, Indonesia, where they mine sulphur. Cameroon, where you've got people diving for sand, or had people diving for sand. In Chad, Mali, Niger, and Ethiopia, you've got camel caravans. There you go, camel caravans. I'll say that again. Camel caravans going across the Sahara carting salt. Unfortunately, Niger and in certain countries over there, it's just gotten too dangerous to go in there. In Central Asia is really rich in artisanal mining. You've got Pakistan, you've got salt, you've got gems, you've got whatever else. India's got, numerous artisanal mine sort of things, coal and gems, and I think salt as well. And then you've got Afghanistan, which has got lapis lazuli. Again, too dangerous at the moment because of the Taliban. And then right up in the Russian Far East, in the far north of the northeastern part of the world, you've got gold and mammoth tusk and whatever else. Next, please, Jess. And next again, characteristics of these places. Wow, it's so hard to bolt down a few, but they're just hives of activity. I mean, this place here, this was up near Waiugia, and at the time I was there were about 50,000 people mining for gold or employed in the artisanal villages there. So typically you have the miners in these places, and then you have the villages and the infrastructure that wraps around. So these villages, imagine the goldfields here in Australia back in the 1850s. You got people selling mining equipment, you got people selling food, you've got people selling, it might be wood to use in the mine shafts. And for example, what you can typically have in these mining places is the maturation of these places varies. So you can have a mature place like this is here, and the wood's old, and it's because it's been there for quite a while. And then you can go to a new mining area, and I've one sort of sticks in my mind in southeastern Burkina Faso, and it was all new wood because it was a new mining area, so they're chopping down trees and all of that type of stuff. You have things like prostitution. You have sort of the artisanal mining camps. One of the big characteristics of these places is you get lots of hessian and tarps, blue tarps, sort of so common because everything's has to be mobile. And this mining area that I was working in, I went back 3 or 4 months later, and it literally gone from being 50,000 people down to about a couple of hundred when I was there. Next, please, Jess. This was in India, underground coal miners in eastern India. There was an insurgency going on when I was there, so we had car bombs going off and all of that sort of stuff, and had to be a little bit careful. But this mine was pretty safe. One of the guys in the village was a mining engineer, so he helped them place the pillars in this underground mine. So you had sort of, they can be quite complex economic entities, or they can be quite complex economic infrastructure that wraps around. So in this case, you had the coal cutters, and then you had the Biharis, which were the people that means coal carriers that were carrying out of the mine. And then when it got out of the mine, you had the women that did the coking of the coal, and they bought the coal off them. And each person, obviously, each party added their margin, and then eventually it ended up in the villages. And next, please, Jess. And so what could happen would be with the guys on bicycles would carry the coal that's come out from a place like that underground coal mine, and they would transport that between 30 and 72 kilometres to villages. And the guys who are transporting 35 kilometres to the village, they do 1 or 2 trips in a day. And then the people doing carting at 72 kilometres they go down on one day, come back on the next type thing. These women here were working in a large open cast coal mine, and they were literally working at the coalface. So they would go in on the change of shift between night and day, and there would be about an hour when the machines were down. And then they'd extract coal from the coalface, and they'd stick it up, they'd stockpile it on the edge of the mine for when the machine started up, and then they'd carry it out. The thing about India that was different to all the other artisanal mining places I've been to was that these people didn't have much of a choice to do what they were doing. Pretty much everywhere else I've been and everywhere else I have seen, artisanal miners choose to do that work because they can earn more money than they would in the fields and the farms. And the perfect analogy for that is FIFO workers here in Australia. Most of the FIFO workers do what they do, not because they love what they do, but because the money's 2 or 3 times better than what they would in the fields and farms. So they do that to get ahead. In India, basically the rapid industrialization had led to rapid expansion of the coal industry. And coal, even though these people, the Adivasi, had a preeminent place in the constitution, the Indian constitution, the coal miners, coal was listed as one of 5 strategic or priority minerals in the Indian constitution. And so they didn't have much of it's basically when a coal mine wanted to go somewhere, they just went there, and very often these people got no compensation. And they had to so basically what was happening, they'd gone from, living a traditional life or a semi-traditional life to then having to rely on the industry that had brought about their near destruction. Next, please, Jess. This was back in northern Pakistan, one of the most spectacular places you'll ever see. We had 2 7,000-metre mountains in earshot. One was the 27th highest mountain in the world, about 7,887 or something, Rakaposhi. And just across the glacier, there was Dhiram, which was 7,027 metres. Hardcore. I mean, everything basically got brought in by foot or donkey. So even meat vendors would come in, they'd wheel herds of goats or sheep up from the village below, and then the miners would buy what they needed, and yada, yada, yada. Next, please, Jess. So you can see here's, guys bringing stuff up on donkeys. All my camera gear on that trip went up by donkey. In the background, in cloud, is Dhiram, and you can see just this most spectacular glacier that runs down past it. I still yearn to be at Shumapakor just for the beauty of the place. Next, please, Jess. This is back in the volcano in Indonesia. Surprisingly few injuries and deaths here. I mean, I think mining had been going on there in Kawah Ijen since 1968. I think in the 50 years there'd probably been 6 or 7 deaths, which when you think about, there's 300 people working there, it's a pretty good injury rate for the number of years and for the number of people working there. That sort of makes me it begs belief when I sort of see that some of the stuff we go on in large scale mining these days, and these guys are able to stay safe working in an active volcano with no PPE. Next, please, Jess. Back in Bolivia, this guy was deep inside Cerro Rico again. He was grading the ore. And he just sat there for 8 hours a day, smashing rock and putting the different rock on different piles. I mean, as some here will know, prospectors have this incredible capacity to, they just have this incredible capacity to read ore bodies. It seems we were talking about it just this morning or yesterday, and they seem to smell the ore rather than need sort of some of the fancy technology we have today. Next, please, Jess. Some of the myths around ASM, all the miners die when they hit 40. That's rubbish. They're all hotbeds for conflict minerals, terrorism, organised crime and human trafficking. That's rubbish as well. Obviously, there's an element of that. Terrorism is sort of making inroads into artisanal mining in different places around the world, and that happens to some extent. It can be as simple as miners coming home from the artisanal workings at the end of the day with gold or whatever in their pocket, and then the terrorists waiting, extremists waiting for them to go past, and then just petty banditry type stuff. All ASM workers and children are ruthlessly being exploited. Well, I talked about that a bit a minute ago. A complex issue, a very complex issue, and unfortunately gets distilled down to the lowest common denominator. The environmental footprint for ASM is much worse than for large-scale mining. I mean, some will disagree with me on that. That's not been my experience. I've seen some pretty horrendous devastation conducted by, in the large-scale mining. In one country in particular, I saw 1,000 kilometres of alluvial gravels had just basically been dug up and chucked on the side of the river, and it was just a mess. Even here in Australia, there's a myth that we are great at rehabilitation at the end of the mine. That's not been my experience. Typically, mines are put on care and maintenance or closed down until ore prices pick up, and that either that or they'll get flicked to a junior miner that comes in and runs out of money, and then no one's able to foot the bill for the rehabilitation. I'm not saying ASM's better. I'm not saying it's worse. In my experience, it's hard for me to say that one is better than the other. But certainly, what I don't like is that a lot of people seem to try and compare the best of large-scale mining against the worst of artisanal mining, and that's not right. If we're going to do that, we need to compare, the median of each. And there's issues with each. Don't get me wrong. There's a death every 10 minutes. That's rubbish. Typically, a lot of the deaths in, say gold in West Africa happens when miners that sort of continue to mine through the wet season, and you've got problems with ground stability and all of that sort of stuff. You don't see nearly so many deaths during the dry season. All ASM locations are hotbeds of human trafficking. I haven't seen that. I'm sure it's going on. All ASM is illegal and therefore must be stopped. I haven't seen that. I gave you an example just before. And then artisanal mining doesn't benefit the state. Large-scale mining does. Again, that's, the thing about artisanal mining is that most of the money that the miners generate stays in local economies. When large-scale miners go in, most of the time they come from outside the country, and a substantial share of that money goes overseas, not to the government. And if you want a sort of a poignant example, again, here in Australia, we've got the major mining companies setting up Singapore marketing hubs. Now they're not doing that because they think it's better to market in Singapore. They're trying to reduce their tax. So again, we need to be balanced when we're talking about these things and recognise that large-scale mining also has significant issues. Next, please, Jess. One of the interesting things about artisanal mining that most people wouldn't know, artisanal mining employs about 40 million people directly around the world and about 240 million people indirectly. So if you put that into context in terms of the working population of third world countries, it works out at something like 10 to 12%. Artisanal mining employs about 10 to 12% of the workforce in third world countries. If you're looking at just on a population basis, it works out at around about 3.6%. So if we were to stop buying from these artisanal miners, automatically we're making these 4% of the most severely damaged people in the world even worse off. So in my strong view, just disenfranchising these people is not the option. Next, please, yes. This is back in the volcano. These guys were some of the toughest people I'd ever met. The average carry of the miners coming out of that volcano was about 70 kilograms. And they had to haul that a kilometre up and out of the volcano. And some people had fallen on that track going out and died. And then 3 kilometres down to a way station. I think the record carry out of the volcano was about 120 kilos. I had to go carting about 40 kilos out with the bamboo things cutting into the shoulders, and it wasn't pleasant. Next, please, Jess. You can see this was Yako, I'm pretty sure, and it was Yako in central Burkina Faso. There's about 10,000 miners working in this one place. This was taken at the end of the day, so you've got a lot of workers parked up, relaxing. It's a really good time, and it's a really good feel to be in the artisanal workings at the end of the day because people are much more relaxed. Next, please, Jess. This was in Guinea. I had to quarantine for Ebola after I'd spent time in this artisanal field. But again, you can see all the women coming in. The women tend to do a lot of the processing in artisanal workings in Africa. I got there in the morning at about 5 a.m. and there was just me and my fixer and then a security guard with a rifle there. Within about 3 to 4 hours, there were 10,000 people in those workings. It was quite amazing. Next, please, Jess. So you can see that was the same workings as the last slide. So we went from 3 people about 5 in the morning to that many people at 9 or 10 in the morning. Quite incredible. And these guys weren't working far from large-scale mining operations either. Next, please. Here you can see, going back to the coal miners in India, you can see the women hauling the coal out. So they'd haul the coal out and then they'd sort of sell it to other people who then transport that coal to market in some of the major centres. They'd also obviously keep some for sale. I'm jumping around here a little bit, and the reason I'm doing that is because it's much better I'd rather give you an overall sense for some of the things that go on rather than sort of drive too deep within 1 or 2 sets of workings. Next, please, Jess. This was back in Burma. Women carrying the buckets of used oil. They were literally going. It was hardcore work, and they loved it. And it was, I ate with these women and had laughs with them and all of that sort of stuff. And you can see there, I reckon that guy on a motorbike in the middle there. He looks like an undercover cop because there were about 20 undercover cops in that oil field, and quite a few of those was sort of there spying on me as well and reporting back to the oil barons and all sorts of stuff. We had major problems. Next, please, Jess. This is Simon, my mate Simon. He was one of the sand divers to be put out of work when the dredge came in on the Wiri River estuary in Cameroon. To give you an idea, these guys dive twice a day around the low tide. They'd dive down anywhere between about 1 and 7 metres, and then they'd extract the sand from the bottom, come up, tip it into their canoes or kayaks or whatever it was. And then they do that for about, in a 3.5 hour shift, each of those sand divers would bring up around 1.7 tonnes of sand. Quite incredible. All sorts of hazards. Some of the hazards there, range to snakes coming down on weed mats. They'd had a guy bitten once with a snake coming down on a weed mat bit him, and you got stingrays, you've got sand and whatever else ingressing into orifices, and very, very tough guy. I was lucky to end up with these guys. He was the toughest guy on the river, and he was former national boxing champion. And he was probably the biggest guy on the river. Next, please, Jess. Righto, what drives these people to want to do what we perceive to be incredibly dangerous and hard work? For starters, these guys in the volcano, they took a huge amount of pride in what they did. But the sole reason they were there was to get themselves and their families ahead, to put their kids through a better education, or to put them through education, to buy a better house. Exactly the same things that drive us, just albeit in a very, very different context. Next, please, Jess. But it was hardcore work, and there were days that we're in the volcano that everyone really, really suffered. To give you an idea of the corrosiveness of the volcano, the pen and coins in my pocket all went black, and I had a pen with semi-brass pen. They all went black within 3 days. So this is one of the most toxic environments sort of on Earth. The Crater Lake, which was just here, was here in the volcano as well, was the most acidic lake in the world. It had a pH of less than battery acid. Next, please, Jess. So here you can see Papa Agus. He was one of the sulphur miners, the longest serving sulphur miner. He's been mining there since 1968. He's still mining there as of last year. He wanted to buy himself. He was going to pull out when he had himself 5 cattle. So obviously, cattle are huge store of value for people in that area. When I spoke to him last year, he was only up to 2 cattle, but he was looking old. He was early 70s when I spoke to him last year. Old mate loved his rooster too, just quietly on the right there. Next, please, Jess. This is Muhammad, mate of mine. He was one of the guys that started, was one of the founding miners at Chimabukor when they started mining back in 1988. He's looking for a wife, an Australian wife, if anyone's interested. I gave him some options, but he didn't seem too impressed. So yeah, he was mining at about 4,700 meters. Intelligent guy, and he was one of the things about he wanted to be. He was above all the other miners because he didn't trust the mines the other miners were in. A lot of the other miners had gotten complacent there, and when I say complacent, from a safety point of view, that there was supposed to be, I think, 8 or 9 foot separation between mines on the same level, and that some of the mines were getting as close as 18 inches type thing, which is all good when you're up where Muhammad is. But a few times I was inside these mines and blast went off in the mine next door, and they hadn't warned anyone. And just the whole thing shakes 9 times because they generally put in 9 or 10 sticks of dynamite. And yeah, I was actually nearly killed in a blast on one of those paths in the middle of frame there. Old mate didn't warn properly that there was blast going on. And a bit of fly rock went past about 200 k's an hour, about a metre from the face, so it could have been a problem. Next, please, Jess. And you can see, like, these guys here, they're just doing what they're doing to get ahead. Decent people. They're not terrorists. They're not criminals. They're not any of that. They're just wanting to get ahead for themselves and their families. Next, please, Jess. And here's Muhammad's family. You can see on the right of frame. And that's his son Muhammad's in the middle, and that's his son, Sabir, on the right. Sabir worked on the mountain as well. That mine, Chimabukor, had provided a lot of benefits for the village. It set up a health fund. It helped provide education for people in the village, and people like Muhammad and some of the successful miners, and probably about a third of those miners would make gem finds, good gem finds through the year. They had investment properties. They had kids in private school. Like, artisanal mining had done a lot for their community. Next, please, Jess. Back into the silver mine in Cerro Rico, another percussion driller. You'll see on if you look at his cheek on his, what's our left, his right cheek, he's chewing on coca leaf. So coca leaf is the raw material from which cocaine is derived. Bolivia is one of the few places in the world that you can harvest a coca leaf legally. The miners there used it because they believe it sort of helped alleviate fatigue and hunger and help them deal with the effects of the limited oxygen at that height. There's probably 50% of the oxygen at the height they were working as there was at sea level. Next, please, Jess. This is another guy in Cerro Rico. When I took that photo, just as I was taking it, I said, mate, there's a bit of overhanging rock there. I said, it's pretty dangerous. He said, that's all right. He said, don't worry. He said, Alteo will look after us. And Alteo was the devil. So these miners all worship God in the light, but once they entered the darkness of the mine, God was out the window and Alteo took over. And they believed that if they provided offerings and the like to Alteo, then Alteo would not only keep them safe, but he'd help them find large ore bodies as well. Next, please, Jess. And here again, what motivates these miners. This is in Spanish, but loosely translated, says, here lie the men that gave their lungs in the deep mine shafts for the betterment of mankind. And that really captures why they were doing it. The miners didn't want their kids to go and do that, but the miners were doing that so their own kids could live better lives than what they were living. Next, please, Jess. So again, just surmising what I've said, most miners are doing what they're doing so that they can get ahead. It's most that I've come across are not forced into slavery or any of that sort of stuff. They're doing it because it's a quicker way of getting ahead than working in the villages and the farms. They're sacrificing the life they could be living now for the, in italics, prospect of better lives. Next, please, Jess. So why does any of this matter? Well, in recent years, artisanal mining, 280 million, if you talk directly and indirectly, has been caught up by the responsible sourcing movement. Are our clothes ethically made? Is our gold ethically mined? Is our gold mined in an environmentally sustainable way? All terms which are complete oxymorons, but it's driven in parallel by consumers. I call them the latte sippers. Legislative change, so Dodd-Frank, the OECD due diligence guidelines, and then activist NGO groups as well. And people are concerned about a whole range of things, from habitat and environmental destruction, climate change, human rights concern, and then maybe at a sovereign level to combat organised crime. People more and more are looking at their purchasing decisions and how they can have an impact in each of these areas. Interestingly, most people don't want to pay a premium for that, so it's a bit of a funny one. It's as much as it's a noble development, it's largely futile, because if you drill into each of those things, what does any of it mean? So what's a human rights abuse? It could be a million different types of human rights abuses. And people are not weighing up the totality of the picture. They're sort of, they've a lot of the corporates have been caught in this as well. They've sort of, I'll talk about it more, but I'll get you to change slide here, Jess, if you could. I suppose what's often recognised as a major driver, or legislative instrument that really got people thinking about and companies thinking about the responsible sourcing was Dodd-Frank back in 2010. The Obama administration enacted a provision, Section 1502, which required all US SEC listed companies to check their supply chains for tin, tantalum, tungsten, and gold, and to see if they might originate from, and to see if they came out of, the Great Lakes region of Central Africa, so the Congo and neighbouring countries. They weren't just focused on the importers; they focused on the end retailers as well. And the companies that had identified that in their supply chains then had to report yearly on what steps they were taking to address any risks that they could be contributing to the funding of armed groups or human rights abuses. Next, please, Jess. In 2016, the OECD enacted the third iteration of its due diligence guidelines. And there's an interesting thing about all of this. The OECD are made up of 37 member countries. They're all developed nations, which is, that's great. But one of the issues that I have is what we've got, I don't know if the people here have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but you've got essentially people in the bottom part of Maslow's pyramid, and they're essentially just focused on basic survival, food, shelter, and whatever else. And then when you get to the top part of the pyramid, you're looking at the meaning of life and all of that sort of stuff. There's a lot more navel gazing and all of that. So what we've got happening here is we've got people, companies, governments in the top part of Maslow's hierarchy of needs trying to, and with quite some success, dictating to those in the bottom part of Maslow's hierarchy of needs how they should and shouldn't be living their lives. So the people with all the money are trying to tell those who haven't got any money what they can and can't do. And I just think it's got major flaws in it. But the OECD sort of, I think there was 10 conflict and high-risk areas, basically countries listed in the recent due diligence guidelines. And it seeks to catch supply chain risks of taking torture, cruel, inhumane and degrading treatment, any forms of forced or compulsory labour, the worst forms of child labour, human rights violation and abuses. This stuff gets so subjective and it becomes so hard to, what is a human rights abuse, for example? Like what circumstances of child labour are good and what circumstances of child labour are bad? Next, please, Jess. And then start of this year, after quite some gestation, the EU conflict minerals regulation came into force, and that's drawn largely from the OECD guidelines, but it still only applies to the 3 Ts and gold. And I have trouble understanding why it's just tin, tantalum, tungsten, and gold. And the OECD says that these are the main areas of concern, but I would have thought these should be areas of concern all around the world, regardless of what they are. They require EU companies to ensure they import the 3 TGs from responsible and conflict-free sources only. And they say the focus is on only those things because these are the things they consider are linked most often to conflict and human rights abuses. Indirectly, it affects around 500 smelters and refiners, whether in Europe or otherwise. Next, please, Jess. So you've got different requirements for upstream and downstream companies out of the EU guidelines. Upstream companies have to comply with the mandatory rules on due diligence when they report, because they're said to be in the most risky part of the supply chain. And then they segment out the downstream companies into two categories. And each member state then needs to sort of monitor and enforce whether this regulation's been complied with. Next, please, Jess. So why am I taking you through all of that? The problem is what's happened out of, all of this stuff in recent years is it's made a lot of big companies nervous about where their products are coming from. So you might have had initially consumers being nervous about where their stuff's come from. Now companies have become very, very nervous from a reputational perspective, but also from a legal perspective. And so what's happening is a lot of companies have sought to shift their sourcing of raw materials, and you saw some of the numbers earlier, 20% for gold, 25% for tin, 80% for sapphires, away from areas that are potentially risky from a compliance perspective, whether it be Dodd-Frank or the EU or the OECD, to supply chain sources that are, you might say, much safer. So you've had companies like BMW, Apple, Tiffany that's sort of leading the charge on that. So these companies are shifting some or all of their sourcing away from, say, artisanally mined supply chains to, it might be developed world supply chains, say a large-scale mine in the US, which is what Tiffany does for a lot of their sourcing. Now, is that good? Because what we're doing is we're shifting a large chunk of global wealth away from these people to benefit the top 1% of the top 1% of global wealth. Is that a good outcome? Are we actually helping these people by just cutting them off at the knees? And I would seriously question that. Next, please, Jess. So what am I saying the way forward is? At the moment, the people that seem to have benefited most are those that, the big company brands are benefiting most from this, it seems, at the moment, because they can say our product is responsibly sourced, use that in their marketing, and they're only going to use that in their marketing because they know that consumers will be attracted to that. Consumers might not necessarily pay a premium for that, but they know that consumers might be attracted to that. I've not seen significant evidence on the ground that things are improving for these people as a result of all this legislative change. So, next slide, please, Jess. So what I'm advocating is that for something to be a good corporate social responsibility policy, the eye needs to be on the development outcome, not the process of getting there. At the moment, we're very, very focused on the process. We've got to recognise that the circumstances of these people are very, very different to us. They can't aspire to be bankers or lawyers or fund managers or whatever else. They've never even heard of these job titles most of the time. Their frame of reference is, how do I bust out of the village? How do I leapfrog everyone else in this life as quickly as possible? Same as what we do here in the developed world, but we're just operating from a different starting position. Picture ourselves in their shoes. What would we do if we had no education or money, and basically every day we're scrapping for food? Most of us would do what the FIFO workers do here, or others who work an 80-hour week, or cleaners, or they'd do whatever they could to get themselves ahead as quickly as possible. Next, please, Jess. I break responsible sourcing into three categories. There's the cheats way out, which some companies that I've named, BMW being a classic, Apple, Tiffany, and that is to shift your sourcing from artisanally mined sources to developed world supply chains. Very safe. You're not going to get in trouble. Everything looks hunky-dory from a compliance perspective. There are also those companies that are shifting their sourcing from artisanal mining, as in its rawest form, to what's called responsible sourcing, where you've got some satellite projects around the world where they've basically set up, responsible artisanal mining, which means, they're giving them better safety gear and the environmental practices are better and all of that sort of stuff. But the problem is with that, when you do that, you're still disenfranchising the people you're taking your sourcing away. You're cutting them off at the knees and you're putting your sourcing somewhere else. And then there are those, what I call raw artisanally mined sources. So what I'm saying is companies should, rather than cut these people off at the knees, they need to sort of sit with them and they need to work with them and improve things. And that's harder. There's a lot more difficulty in, cleaning these places up. And the difficulty operates at a whole range of levels, right down to, governments seeing big companies wanting to help these people and governments wanting to step in and act as an intermediary and take the cash. It's a really, really difficult thing, but for mine, it is the only way to do this. What we seem to forget in the West is a lot of the problems we have, whether it be terrorism or narcotics or whatever else, often they can be traced back to a failure of law and order and a breakdown of civil society in some of the poorest places in the world. And if we cut these people off, all we're doing is we're encouraging the momentum for the breakdown of some of these societies. Next, please, Jess. So again, just to summarise what I was saying, 280 million of the world's poorest people become disenfranchised. We put 4% of the world's population out of work. The cure becomes far, far worse than the original problem. Any move, if we're going to move away from artisanally mined sourcing and say, no, you can't have children working in the mines and you can't have this and you can't have that, we need to put forward solutions and not just advocate solutions and tell them solutions, but we need to put some of our own hard cash to help them as well, because it's not going to happen in a vacuum. Next, please, Jess. So how you can help. Basically, I want to educate people about artisanal mining so that better decisions are made. It's an issue that most people in the developed world know nothing about. I've worked in 30 years in large-scale mining around the world. I reckon I've seen more large-scale mines than most around the world. And then I've worked in artisanally mining for about 15 years globally. I've seen both sides of the debate. I'm not for or against either side, but what I'm after is that people appreciate the nuances of the debate. And I don't like the best of one being compared against the worst of the other. It's just not fair. At the moment, in the responsible sourcing debate, most of the benefit goes primarily to developed world economies and large companies, not the people that they say they're trying to help. Next, please, Jess. So I'd love to talk to, if anyone thinks that they can help with this, I'd love to talk to potential exhibition partners, people who see value in exhibiting this work, inviting along key decision makers, or have clients and consumers that have a genuine interest in responsible sourcing, where things come from. And I'm also looking for funding partners to sort of help complete the book and the film that I'm doing, and fund those exhibitions that go around the world. Next, please, Jess. Where you can learn more about me, you can order a signed GARIMPEIROS book. Probably the easiest way to do that at the moment is to just send me an email. HB at, I'll give you the easy one to remember, hb@hughbrown.com. And you get a discount if you pre-order the book now. That helps me sort of fund the remaining part of the project. Next, please, Jess. And you can learn more about the GARIMPEIROS project vis-a-vis my website, www.garimpeirosproject.com, or my LinkedIn profile, or the garimpeirosproject.com email. So maybe if you want to take a photo of that, if anyone's interested in helping, I'll give you 5 seconds to do that. And you can join my mailing list or contact me directly here by emailing me at hb@garimpeirosproject.com. So look, that's a really quick run through. I hope that it's been informative for the people that have attended and for the people that sort of come behind. And I haven't got a long period for questions, but happy to take a couple off the bat now.
Yeah, really appreciate you taking the time. So thank you.